Well, good afternoon.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this online event in which we're talking about the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a game changer for the US renewable hydrogen. We're going to talk about how it works. We're going to talk about how it actually becomes a law that your company can follow, can take advantage of. We're going to talk about how it's going to impact projects both in the US and also worldwide. So welcome today. My name is Belén Gallego, and I am part of the RENMAT team, the ATA Insights team. We do a series of webinars that are free to attend, and you can join anytime. And we also do events that you can attend face-to-face and meet some of the people that you're seeing here today. I'm going to, first of all, have our panelists today introduce themselves so that you get to know them a little bit better. But while they're introducing themselves, I would like to ask you to introduce yourselves as well so that the panelists can see who you are and where you're joining from. Usually what I ask is introduce yourself, your company, and where you're joining from today so that we can all see it. Make sure that you tag everyone so that we can see it, okay? And in the meanwhile, I'm going to ask the speakers to introduce themselves. So first, I'd like to ask Frank, please, if you could introduce yourself so everyone who doesn't know you may get to know you a little better. Go right ahead.
Good. Well, thank you. I am Frank Wolak. I am the president and CEO of the Fuel Cell and Hydrogen Energy Association here in the United States. We are a Washington, D.C. based industry association and the leading industry association for hydrogen in the U.S. As we will hear from all of our panelists, in fact, this IRA that has only been upon us for about 8 weeks is in fact a pivotal shift in the way the U.S. is looking at the development of hydrogen. And I assume we will be exploring many facets of what is in front of us on this hour-long session. The association that I'm the chair of has been in existence for over 30 years and has been the leading voice for hydrogen for those 30 years. And we have over 90 members running a full spectrum of all types of organizations from within the hydrogen community. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Frank. And you're based in Washington, D.C., am I right?
That's correct.
Yeah, I'm based today in Los Angeles, California. I'll ask Mona, please, could you please introduce yourself next? Mona is also very well known in the industry.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. Yes.
Go right ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Frank. I'm very excited to be here today and share with our audience. My name is Mona Dajani, and I am the global co-leader of the Infrastructure, Energy, and Renewable team at Pillsbury, Winthrop Shaw Pittman. It's a global law firm. I'm based in New York City, and I started my energy transaction journey over 20 years ago, putting deals together. And, just we have worked on hydrogen deals all over the world. We have a global also hydrogen map of projects around the world too, to kind of show others that are in the space what, where the projects are and who's involved and what's going on. And it's just been very, very exciting. My background is I have in addition to being a lawyer, I'm an engineer and I have an MBA, and really my job is working with clients to put deals together in the renewable energy, clean energy space. And a lot of that in the last, I would say over 10 years has been hydrogen, and only recently in the United States, it's really picked up here, those deals. And I know that's something that we'll talk about later on, but thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mona. Last but not least, I'd like to ask Alejandro, please, to introduce himself and what you do. Yes, go right ahead.
Hello. Good to be on this panel. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Alejandro Perellón. I'm based in New York. I'm an investment director at High 24. We are a relatively new infrastructure fund focusing on the 100% on the clean hydrogen space. I myself lead our investment activities for both North and South America. A little bit later, I'll go into some more about our mandate and the areas where we're investing. But on a personal level, my background is mostly on the finance side. I started off in investment banking. I then went to work for a mining-focused private equity fund, after which I decided to pivot to the renewable space. And just before joining High 24, I was in the renewables group of a natural gas utility based in Portland called Northwest Natural.
Excellent. So now you know Frank, you know Mona, and you know Alejandro, and chances are like at least one of these people you know before, because they've been in the industry for so long. I think I'm not wrong, right? Alejandro and Mona, you're both in New York at the moment. So we have a very global event today, and I can see actually from what the messages that people are sending that they're everywhere in the US. There are even some people from Europe, but mostly different places in the US. So I'm glad to see this. I was attending last week a big renewable event here in Los Angeles, and I have to say, even Mona was there. I was surprised, by how still little people have understood exactly how groundbreaking and how changeable and what a game changer this legislation is. I've been kind of going like, how do you not understand it? So I'm glad that I think the message is going through. So here's how it's going to work. We're going to do first like some 5 minutes from each of the speakers, so that you get an idea of a little bit of background, their positioning, and where they're coming from in the topic, okay? Then after that, we have like a little bit of a structure that we've worked on to make sure that we drive into the topics that are the most interesting. But you are welcome to send questions, and we can intertwine those into the conversation as much as possible, okay? So we're going to try and be really useful. Of course, this is just like a guide, which takes an hour. So there's only an amount of that we can get into. But these webinars are about information and they're about networking. So you know who to ask and who are the right people that have the right information for you and your business as well. So you can do both things at the same time. So I'd like Frank, if you can get us started, please, with your perspectives. You know this topic very, very well. And before you start, just a reminder that we are recording these webinars. You'll have it available. You can watch it again. You can pass it to your colleagues. And whatever materials you see on screen, you will have access to too. It's just not everyone will have actual PowerPoint, but the ones that do, you will have like a copy of those materials. So Frank, without further ado, if you can get us started and we'll take it from there. We cannot hear you at the moment. Can you just switch on your...
There we go.
Yeah.
I do have the opportunity to share a screen if you would like. And
yeah, go right ahead. Just press share screen and pick the document. Yeah, pick the document.
Okay.
And people are continuing to join. This is amazing. So we have people from most of the different states. Right. If you can put that in large screen for me.
There you go. Okay. Well, I can
Yes,
hear it. Do you
perfect.
see it all?
I can see it and I can hear you. Go ahead.
Very good. Well, thank you. Much of what I'm going to cover here is a very simple oversight of what we're going to all talk about, and I'm sure some of the topics will be covered by my colleagues. But I thought that this might allow for a bit of a backdrop. I've already introduced the association. I will provide this brief presentation for the group. But what I wanted to do is sort of set, like, how did we come about, and why is it important to have put together the IRA in the first place? And I think a bit of a backdrop of where we are in the U.S. and what our goals are and how hydrogen can impact us will help frame the value of the IRA. There is a significant amount of industrial hydrogen being consumed in the U.S. today, about 11 million metric tons. It is a $17 billion U.S. industry, which much of that coming from steam methane reforming or byproduct hydrogen. Very little of it comes from green hydrogen. And so one of the items, as we look at the value of hydrogen being introduced into the broader energy resource mix, is the proportion of which new hydrogen will be greener and cleaner. And some of the incentives in the IRA were designed to move from this industrial-based use of hydrogen and platform that's mostly steam methane and byproduct to something that is far greener, cleaner, and more readily accessible. And why were those goals important? Our association had crafted a roadmap with a number of stakeholders in 2020, 2021, that was part of our messaging leading up to the efforts to build the IRA and its components in its earlier versions. But some of the reasons why the IRA is so important is that if we make significant adoption of new hydrogen by 2050, some of the resulting impacts could be a reduction of 16% CO2 in the US, a 36% reduction in NOx, the creation of a significant number of new jobs, as well as over $750 billion in new revenue from various industries. So as our U.S. Congress began looking at the framework of the IRA and its earlier versions, these kinds of numbers were in the background, thinking that if we start introduce hydrogen at scale, we can achieve major inroads into our decarbonization goals, as well as in many ways, and we'll talk about this, set the stage for how the U.S. economically can position itself on the world stage with direct investment in the U.S. And I will leave these only up, and I'll present them to the audience later, but because I'm sure our other panelists will talk about this, but there are several elements within the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the predecessor to the IRA and the Inflation Reduction Act that help stimulate investment. We will all talk about these in general, but I will summarize this by saying that, and I was asked in a conference in New York about a week ago, summarize what you think the IRA did. And I said it really, what the US Congress did is unleash US capitalism into the energy markets by stimulating direct investment and causing investors, companies, and participants in this space to begin looking at how they participate, what kind of investments they make. And I would say that's a generalization, but a fair way to assess what the IRA did. I'll leave with that, and I'm happy to take questions among my panelists, but I'll turn this now back over to my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank. Really interesting. I think everyone now is going to realize exactly what this means. It's really exciting times. Mona, I'd like to invite you next, to give us a little bit of your 5 cents into the conversation.
Sure. Just quickly. So what I do, and I'm in a unique position because I represent all different types of players in the industry. Whether they're in, utilities, transportation, renewable energy companies too, as well, just aviation. So this is a game changer. This is the largest hydrogen subsidy in the world. This is an inflection point in the hydrogen development, and will provide, I think, just a lot of different deals to occur. We have that, green hydrogen receiving IRA hydrogen tax incentives are already competing with the incumbent, the gray hydrogen, this also with the IRA, it's pushed forward the timeline for and help accelerate clean energy. And, many people, many experts project that they believe that the low carbon hydrogen can really start competing with fossil fuels applications, such as steel making, aluminum, in the transportation sector, especially with heavy equipment and trucks and shipping, much quicker and much sooner. So, and I'd love to talk later if you'd like, or I could talk now about some of the highlights of it and how what I do is, put these deals together. I bring all the parties, the counterparties together, the financing. We also add the tax credit. We monetize the tax credits. We were doing this before the IRA was even passed. We already had these baked in the documents, how they were going to look like. And we also advised, people in that were in high places in Washington on how these tax credits could look like. But I guess just to just as a final word about this before I totally get into this is these hydrogen tax incentives, they're not guaranteed. It largely will hinge on two elements. One is the accounting systems that are implemented to ensure that the hydrogen source claiming the subsidy is actually low emitting, and the applications where this low cost hydrogen is being used. So if the subsidized hydrogen is low carbon and targeted at the hardest to electrify applications, the tax incentives will work and be a huge boom. If the hydrogen source is greenwashed and used in applications that have more cost-effective climate solutions, then the tax incentives risk, either being recaptured or not even being implemented, and actually causing increased costs to the clean economy. So, so that's what I'll say now, but I don't want to take too much more, and then I'm happy to geek out into this a little bit further on.
Legally geek out, yeah, and we need a little bit of this because
legally
we
and
need to,
scientifically, yeah, and accounting wise too, yeah. So
we need to break it up a little bit. So definitely, if, for sure. But I mean, you have a good point there, and in the end, you've got all the tools to do the right thing.
right, right.
As in anything in life, there is always the loophole where you can do the wrong thing, So, but I think by and large, people do want to do the right thing. So it's just a question of making sure, we go in that direction, or most of the industry goes in that direction. Okay, Alejandro, please, if you could then give us your presentation and your introduction, and then next we'll go into the conversation. I see you guys send questions. This is great. The questions, please do send them in the Q&A box at the bottom, so they're easy for us to manage. Okay, and please continue to introduce yourselves. It's amazing to see all these people here. So much knowledge there on the audience as well. I hope that you guys are excited as we are on this side. Alejandro, go for it.
Yep. So I assume that you can see the presentation.
Yeah, we can see it. It's fine. You're perfect. Go for it.
Perfect. Sounds good. Some of the points that I'll be talking on, my fellow panelists covered, but before getting into the IRA, I did just want to give a little bit more background on our fund and kind of how the role that we're looking to play in the clean hydrogen space. So really quickly right there, we're a relatively new infrastructure fund. We're focused 100% on clean hydrogen. To date, we've raised a little over 1.5 billion euros. We're looking to close the fundraising process in the next couple of weeks. So we've got a good amount of capital to deploy in the space. Something that's unique about our fund is that more than half of the capital we've raised so far has come from strategics or corporates that have some sort of interest in the hydrogen space already. So companies like Air Liquide, Plug Power, Total, Ballard, you have all of the publicly listed logos there on the left, but really the idea here is that we think we're in a unique position to not only provide capital to project owners and project developers, but that we could potentially bring some strategic value to the opportunities that we invest in as well. And that can be either in the form of expertise or things like offtake or technology. In terms of the subsectors or areas within the hydrogen value chain that we're looking to invest in, we're really focusing on both the supply and the demand side, and that translates into upstream and downstream assets. So on the upstream, that can be investing directly into development companies that then go out and build a portfolio of projects. That can also then be in the form of investing directly at the asset level, being a part of the project equity solution. And then on the downstream, we're looking mostly in the mobility space and all of the associated infrastructure that goes hand in hand with that. So things like refueling stations, which could be of the retail variety, or even behind the fence, such as at airports, ports, et cetera. We'll also look at doing asset leasing models where perhaps a fleet operator doesn't necessarily have the capital or the risk appetite to fully convert their fleet. So we could step in and help purchase the planes, trucks, ferries, what have you, and lease them out to the fleet operators. So those are some of the main areas that we're looking at. Geographically, we're targeting the entire globe, but really focusing on allocating about 50% of the capital to Europe, 25% to Asia, and 25% for the Americas. And I could keep talking about the fund, but we're here to talk about the IRA. So I'll transition into that. Just really quick, for those of you that aren't as familiar with the IRA, it is principally, or everyone talks top line about the fact that it's a clean energy bill, but it does have two additional components to it. One is in the form of healthcare reform, where one of the biggest pieces there is that the Medicare program is now free to negotiate drug prices with pharmaceutical companies, and many people expect this will help save the government a substantial amount of money over the next 10 years. The second component is on taxes, where the top line reform there is that a corporate alternative minimum tax of 15% has been implemented. This is expected to also increase revenues. Many companies are subject to the 21% federal tax, but they use deductions and other tax incentives to bring that down, sometimes below 15%. So I mentioned those 2 points because a lot of people ask, how's the clean energy piece of this bill being paid for? And a big part of the answer to that is through the savings of the healthcare piece and increased revenues from the tax piece. On hydrogen specifically, there's a lot of information on this slide, but the key takeaway, and Frank's slide was starting to allude to that, is for the cleanest form of hydrogen, a project will be paid $3 per kilo. And just to put that in context, as Frank mentioned, we consume about 11 million tons of hydrogen a year. So right off the bat, that's $30 to $33 billion of total addressable market just for the tax credits alone. So that's a huge game changer for the hydrogen space here in the US. I will point out in this top right graph that if the emissions associated with the hydrogen that you produce creep up even the slightest past 0.45 kilos of CO2 equivalent up into that range of 150 to 0.45, the value of the credit drops by 67%. So the message from the government here is that it is aiming to incentivize the cleanest forms of hydrogen. There's no doubt about that. Another key aspect of this bill is that the credits will last for 10 years from COD, as long as a project enters into construction before 2033. And I like to keep using this example in that you could, for example, have a project that starts construction in 2032. It doesn't hit COD until 2034. And by the year 2042 or 43, it could still be generating production tax credits. And I point that out because the message is that these credits are going to be in the system and circulating around the hydrogen economy for a significant amount of time. Another key point, and Mona did address it, I do like to bring some caution and tamp down some of the excitement in that there are still some unknowns in terms of what will qualify as green hydrogen. The good news is that the DOE last week released a draft rules and regulation guideline on how they would be looking to calculate what projects qualify for the $3 per kilo, but that's something that's still to be determined and finalized. Here, just wanted to highlight and show a little bit of a high-level sensitivity analysis that we've run and the impact that the $3 per kilo will have on the total cost of hydrogen. So on the left, you have a table that's basically running a sensitivity on average price of electricity to run your electrolyzer, and then the load factor of that electrolyzer, how long you're running it for. And you'll see that on the left, it's pretty much all red, and that denotes costs above $4.50 per kilo. Then on the right, if you apply the $3 PTC, you see that you're now immediately in the $1 to $1.50 range, immediately putting it on a competitive basis with blue hydrogen and even gray hydrogen. There's some instances there where it's below $1, depending on the price that you can achieve in a PPA or by going behind the meter, and how long you're running the electrolyzers for. And then one other point on this slide that I think is very important as we now start to think about how we're going to size these projects and design them. If you look there in the kind of middle of the right table, you'll see that for load factors between 45 to 55%, you're at extremely competitive costs, right? And so what this means is and we believe we're going to start seeing a lot of it, is that you can take projects completely off grid, take them behind the meter, co-locate them with some sort of hybrid solar wind power plant, which is achieving capacity factors of 45 to 55%, and pair it directly with the electrolyzers in order to achieve these low costs. So that's a trend that we're going to be keeping an eye on over the next several years. This slide here piggybacks a bit on that concept, because we are talking about the hydrogen tax credits on this webinar, but the IRA does include many other tax incentives and tax credits up and down the clean energy value chain. And so there are production tax credits for wind and solar power generation as well as other ones such as nuclear. But the point here that I'd like to make is that the IRA does allow you to pair hydrogen tax credits with solar and wind tax credits. And so again, if you co-locate, take the power behind the meter off the grid, you in theory will be able to pair those $3 per kilo hydrogen PTCs with the $26 per megawatt hour renewable electricity PTC. And if you translate that on a per kilo basis, that's an extra $1.43. So really, these integrated projects that we're starting to hear about and see have the potential to earn up to $4.50 per kilo tax credits. And two other points to make here is, one, these tax credits will be adjusted for inflation. So for example, the $26 per megawatt hour, when that bill or credit was first instituted, it was at $15 per megawatt hour. So that's increased with inflation, and we expect that the hydrogen will increase over the next several years from $3 to whatever the rate of inflation may be. And then the last key point here too is these credits are uncapped. A lot of people ask me, especially in Europe, there's a limit. There is no limit. If you produce 1 kilo, you'll get $3. If you produce 10, you'll get 30. And it's regardless of what your peers or other projects may be doing. So it really is trying to incentivize projects on an individual basis and help coalesce the sector. And then one final note in terms of how we're viewing the IRA, and obviously we're looking at it on a US basis, but we also think it's going to have deep impacts on a global basis, in the sense that when we're looking at the economics or returns of a green hydrogen project, there's really three main components that we'll look at. One is the cost of power. The second one is the cost of the electrolyzers. And the third is the efficiency or capacity factors that you can achieve between the renewable power and the electrolyzers themselves. So the IRA, or the $3 PTC, essentially pays for that that first lever, so to speak, if you can achieve a PPA of $55 per megawatt hour. And what we expect is that'll allow projects to get the green light. They'll put in firm orders for electrolyzers. The electrolyzer OEMs will then be able to go out and build bigger and bigger gigafactories now that they'll have firmer customer backlogs. And that should drive down the cost of the electrolyzers via economies of scale, and also by investing in R&D to improve efficiencies and lower down the cost. So we think that in the medium to long term, projects around the world will now be able to benefit from the lower cost of the upfront CapEx requirements that these projects might have. And then lastly, I won't dwell too much on this slide, but it is meant to show how truly monumental and large this bill is, and how it impacts so many different areas of the clean energy space, but then also for how long they're going to be in place, right? Some of these were set to expire and be phased down fairly soon. This bill extends them and also tacks on another 10 years. One thing I will end on, which is a feature that I'm particularly excited about, and it's on the new 45Y and 48D credits, in that the phase out period for these credits, which is on the wind solar basis, will only start to kick in on the later of 2032, or the moment in which the power sector achieves a 75% reduction in its GHG emissions levels versus today. So we're no longer putting an arbitrary timeline of 5 years or 10 years. It's saying, look, let's give these projects runway, and if we've achieved what we're trying to achieve, we'll phase them out. If not, we're going to keep them going until we reach those goals. So that's something that I think is very exciting, that isn't directly tied to hydrogen, because those do have a phase out period. But it is good to know that people are thinking differently from a policy perspective on how to institute these credits. And I'll just end there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alejandro. That was very, very comprehensive. And my first point here really is that if you guys are thinking about this hydrogen, just like low carbon hydrogen, considering all of the other packages that are also in the IRA, you should really be considering renewable hydrogen, because when you stack up the ITCs and the PTCs, it makes the most sense. But that would be my first question. In the first part, I'd like to talk about, Alejandro has gone into a lot of detail about the relevant provisions in the IRA, but essentially, Frank and Mona, how do you stack the ITCs and the BTCs, to work to make sure that the numbers work in terms of hydrogen, especially when it comes to renewable hydrogen, which is the part that is more exciting right now? So you guys want to start?
I can give
Mona.
a summary,
Sure, I'll
and then
go
Mona,
after
I think
Frank.
you can dive into the details here. But I think the Alejandro had a slide that showed the cost of hydrogen without the PTC, and then the cost with the PTC and various efficiencies and capacity factors of electrolyzers. And I think that slide really tells the story that, and maybe more so than the ITC, the PTC is a big driver in the I'll call it the trio. If you take the low cost electricity that's available in the US, the cost of electrolyzers, which is a component cost of this, and then the efficiency capacity factors, you begin to get costs of hydrogen in a place where transactions can begin to happen. And people are looking at what they can do with that output hydrogen vis-a-vis end uses, new markets, storage, whatever it is. And I think those are the kinds of items that our members are beginning to really look closely at. But I think it's also the kind of feedstock that Mona and her team at Pillsbury are beginning to react to, because we've got all this economic impulse and what transactions happen, and of course, Alejandro, what kind of investment dollars are needed. But I think the PTC and that ability to get low cost green hydrogen in many parts of the US is the predominant factor.
Mona, you want to add here?
Sure. It really, first of all, thank you, Frank. Part of what my team does, what we do is we will put together the entire project. And that's like all the project development documents, all the financing that goes with it. And then we look at all the ways that we can monetize cash flow. And one of the ways we are monetizing here, it's, we are stacking hydrogen credits. So, what we're doing is essentially that we're taking all the technologies that are available. Hydrogen, as you know, is an energy carrier. It allows to store energy, also to generate electricity, or even provide heat, and even the production of gas, which the majority of which is very carbon intensive, but the majority of today's hydrogen is derived from fossil fuel. So before the IRA became law, the process of producing green hydrogen or with electrolysis or splitting the hydrogen and the oxygen and water was too expensive for most of the regions in the United States. So what this act does is it allows first clean energy production and investment tax credits. They can be applied to renewable facilities and also nuclear to power electrolysis. And the second is that you can take, it's called a Section 45V, the hydrogen PTC, which provides this $3 per kilogram of low carbon hydrogen produced. Also, we can also apply another incentive, which is to it's for hydrogen that is later used to generate electricity in a combined cycle plant. So unlike fossil fuels, hydrogen emits only oxygen and water when combusted, making zero carbon electricity produced at these plants eligible for production and investment tax credits. So, and then what we can also do is with green hydrogen is, and we started doing this primarily, it was interesting. We were telling them how we were doing this in Europe. There are some countries in Europe that have a national hydrogen plan, hydrogen incentives. like Portugal and Spain and France and Germany, Denmark, Norway, and others, and but nothing nationalized yet in the EU. But what we found and what we replicated, we actually worked on the deals in Europe and then we brought it here to the US, was that those hubs, the hydrogen hubs that had the support of both the government and also the private sector, all the counterparties would come together. We put together offshore wind and hydrogen and shipping deals. We put together hydrogen solar deals. And so what we're allowed to do, that was very important here in the United States. And what we were, telling Washington was that we should be able to stack those together. So what we do is, so as you know, there's solar investment tax credits, there's wind PTC, and what we're allowed to do essentially is we can stack credit stacking for green hydrogen. So we can just add all these, monetize all these different credits. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that there's a prohibition against credit stacking if it's blue hydrogen. So the IRA prohibits blue hydrogen projects from double dipping and receiving both 45Q tax credits for carbon capture and the hydrogen PTC. It's either or. If you have green hydrogen, then you can combine it. So anyway, the reason that we have this prohibition against the credit stacking for blue hydrogen is because this type of stacking would have driven blue hydrogen costs lower than the cost of gray hydrogen, and this would have, we believe, distort the market and provide may not be a good way of going forward in terms of meaningful cost reductions for green hydrogen. So that's one of the game changers here. That's why this is so huge. Another aspect that I'd like to, that's related to this, is that some people believe that this credit duration for the hydrogen credit is too long and that we should introduce a step down. So right now, the PTC for clean hydrogen projects that begin construction as late as 2033 have no credit step down. So as designed right now, the PTC risks surpassing its intent, as we expect that with the current US and also global policy support landscape, that green hydrogen will start experiencing significant cost reductions well before 2030. And we have economists on our team, and they project that green hydrogen costs, when they model this out, it will dip into the negative by the next decade, i.e. meaning that the PTC would be so generous that to receive the credits, that producers would have to pay consumers to buy their products. So we are looking at, and we're advising Washington about the future iterations of this credit and how to assess the state of the market and implement this credit step down if warranted.
Thank you very much. Mona, I have a question. It wasn't in our original structure, but I'm assuming that we expect all of this to be new capacity, new renewable capacity, not like curtailments, which is like, I was here at this conference, this week, and everyone was like, oh, there's not enough curtailment to grant, hydrogen. I was like, no, it's not about that. It's about capacity specifically for this. So can we just, is that the case?
Yeah, that's the case. So it is, again, what it is the PTC is eligible for clean hydrogen, which is defined as a hydrogen source that delivers at a minimum approximately 60% of greenhouse gas reduction relative to today's incumbent and fossil hydrogen or gray hydrogen. So the credit then follows this sliding scale where the higher the GHG reduction, the higher the credit. But yeah, it's like my team, we do a lot of tax equity in the solar and wind and energy storage here in the United States. And we are, we combine the solar plus storage and the wind plus storage. And now we were doing hydrogen too. And so, so you have to keep in mind that, the whole purpose of the IRA really is so that the green hydrogen could be produced, that is produced from 100% renewable energy, and it's new, it's not old. We have things in the tax equity world with solar and wind and storage where we take old projects and we improve a few things, and we're able to still get some tax credit out of it, get some juice. Well, here it's new. It's new. So, but you are allowed to co-locate against existing projects. You may not be able to stack everything, but you are able to monetize that hydrogen PTC, but it does need to be new.
This is an important project because in
Yeah.
Europe, for example, it isn't renewable if it's not new capacity. Very important.
Yes.
It is not exactly like that, but you can't claim unless it's new. Okay.
Right.
I wanted to ask, skipping ahead because we are a bit short on time, as usual. I mean, we need about 3 hours, for this webinar. Not
We
one.
need to focus it like just on like one
Very
aspect.
specific.
Yeah.
You
it was
know
so
what?
good.
I'm willing to do very specific follow-up. So we can talk about that. But with Frank, the next question I'd like to ask you is how these specific provisions convert to value for the hydrogen business. What are the features that the companies actually need to take into account in assessing the opportunities and the risks, and how the IRA answers current issues faced by hydrogen companies, essentially.
Sure.
The next section. Yeah, go for it.
I think one of the items that it sort of has come across in Mona's comments is that this, unlike the older renewables, for those of us who have been around the energy space for a while, which I would say are sort of binary. If you had an electric generating facility with solar panels, you get an ITC, you generate electricity, people use the electricity. Similar to wind, your product was purely electricity. What the IRA has done is it introduced a real diversity of opportunity. Mona talked about the mixing and matching and stacking, what you can stack and what you can't stack. And I think what that yields is what may look like a bit of chaos, but I think it also yields for companies, and our members represent companies that are in petrochemical industry, SMR production, pure electrolyzer production, automakers, and also solar development companies who are looking at the space of hydrogen now and how I take advantage of this. And so my comment is that because of this diversity of mixing and matching that was put together, the value that companies take will largely depend on what segment of the industry they're coming from and how they can take existing assets, mix and match the diversity of the credits and build value chains that are all driven toward the rules for cleaner and cleaner uses of hydrogen. And in some ways, it's all of us have children, or many of us do, and we're all familiar with Lego blocks. And I think in some ways, what the IRA is a set of green and blue Lego blocks put out on the floor that allow for creative developers, financiers, lawyers, and companies to start assembling very creative and useful devices from the building blocks. So the value chains are limited by what Congress allowed in the rules and what you could utilize, the time duration. But I believe there's a considerable amount of creativity in depending on each company's vantage point to assemble these blocks of credits to gain more and more value.
Thank you very much. And going to the section 3 that we had prepared, because we have so many questions, I'd like to ask some at least. The next was the transactional implications of the IRA and factors and opportunities for getting projects. And Mona, this is you. So, like some of the points we wanted to cover is the IRA and its relevance to hydrogen transactions, a legal structure of HPAs, or as they call them, hydrogen power agreements, purchasing agreements rather, and provisions to be considered in designing and financing of projects. So if you just want to give like a few.
Sure. Yeah, I know. That's like a
I know.
Yeah.
It's just we don't have questions. We have like 10 minutes, and I don't know how you guys are doing to spend another 10 minutes on this. If you are, then we can take it a little bit further, but that'll be the time that we have. So
Yeah, so like what my team does is we are representing all different, players in the hydrogen space, whether it is financing, whether it is petrochemicals, or we have a lot of oil and gas companies. We have renewable energy companies that want to do green hydrogen. We have also utilities too. And like a renewable energy project, what we do is, which is different in hydrogen, is we take all the different counterparties that are going to be together, whether they're the EPC contractor, whether they're the financiers, the actual developers, and there's also the technology, depending on what the technology is. And we put them all together and we structure what is the best way to get this project off the ground. And we do an analysis. We look at all the different advantages that each party is bringing to the table. And then we also look at all the different cash flows that are there. Sometimes we have off-takers. We have major off-takers that will come and say, all we want is to buy it, but we don't want to be involved in the project. We just want to have the off-take. How do we structure this? And we say to them, well, are you interested in participating in the project? Do you want to do day-to-day? Do you want to work day-to-day? Or are you really clearly just want the offtake and perhaps even sell it somewhere else? And also another big thing is export from here in the United States. So we look at everything in together, and we figure out what is the best way to structure. And this is where we've come up with these hubs. We have some hydrogen hubs, these private hydrogen hubs that we have worked with a number of our clients here in the United States, as well as in Europe, the Middle East, Asia. And what's the difference between a hydrogen project and a solar and wind, or solar plus wind and storage, or just storage, is there's a lot more, people working together, cooperation, collaboration. We have like one big, I can't really say names because I welcome all of you to go to our website and look at the projects all around the world. But some will say, look, I will provide the technology and I'll finance part of it, but I want something back in return. So we'll build in the documents, so like an equity kicker. Once it gets at certain points, we have milestones. We have like FID, we have NTP, we have COD. And really, we just put all of these together. And that's the big difference with hydrogen, is that there's many of the counterparties, even when they are, they're competing with each other, want to make this work. And that's why we have these hubs. That's why you're seeing these hubs all around the world, because we're taking different areas of the hydrogen chain and putting them together, and people are working together to bring down the cost. And we're also seeing a lot of sharing of the labor. There's a lot of very qualified, highly skilled labor, especially with the oil and gas that are pivoting to hydrogen now. And they're not only working just on hydrogen for this project, but they're then taking that knowledge and working all over in other projects. So it really is a game changer too, as well, in the United States. It's not just about accelerating for clean energy. It's also about the creation of so many jobs. And it is obviously going to be here in the United States, but this knowledge will and this impetus, as you know, here we are very much innovators here in the United States. It's so different working on a deal here in the US versus Europe or Asia or the Middle East, because there's more innovation here. There's a lot, I mean, no offense, love you all, but there's a lot of
No
innovation
offense
here.
at all.
Yeah.
You're totally right.
Yeah,
Someone said to
although
me-
I have to say, like, I'm very proud of Portugal. Wow, it's such a small country and such a big leader in hydrogen. But you know, we are, I think now, because of this bill, but before the bill, we were way behind. And I think now we're catching up on the deal flow. I'll tell you that we are so busy. We have so many deals. It's very bullish. And we would, you know, and at this conference last week, I spoke, I think maybe 3 different times just on hydrogen, specific hydrogen topic. And before, there was a lot of naysayers. And I really believe now, especially with the green hydrogen, especially with stacking, we're definitely going to be accelerating. And I will, this is something else I brought up. Those companies that started here in the US, they didn't have to be US, but at least here in the US, started in the US, because there's a lot of foreign companies that are leaders here in the US in the hydrogen space. They're definitely going to have a market advantage. And that is also the name of the game with hydrogen, is to get that the market leader advantage. It's not easy. They're very difficult. They're very capital intensive projects that require a lot of capital. And there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of money to be made. I'm sure you know, just to amplify what Alejandro was saying, there's we've not only seen in my practice here in New York, smaller infrastructure funds, but we're seeing very big bulge bracket, you know, institutional on Wall Street that are also involved and want to be involved and are involved. So just in hydrogen.
So it went from like the kiddie table, you know, people who kind of wanted and early adopters to, I think, the early majority, I think, with this really quickly. So let's hope that we can see this. In the interest of time, let's talk about what the IRA means for investors, you know, just the last part. And maybe we can take a couple of the questions that we have from the public. Frank, Mona, I invite you to take a look and see if there is any specific that you'd like to answer. So Alejandro, what do you think is going to happen, or what does it mean for investors, both in the US and abroad? I mean, is everyone just going to drop everything they're doing and just look at the US markets? That's what I'm expecting.
Yeah, I think in the short term, for sure, this immediately will attract a lot of the, not just local capital, but global capital as well. As Mona was referring, we are seeing other infrastructure funds that hydrogen starting to be something they're interested in pursuing within their wider energy transition mandates, and I expect that to continue to take place. But as I was mentioning before, I think in the medium to long term, and I saw a question addressing this, they were asking kind of, will this just have everything focus on the US? I do think that this will help or permeate into other parts of the world when it comes to economics for hydrogen projects. You know, just on the CapEx pieces and the efficiencies alone, I think that's something that we're going to be helping to propel and move forward, and that everyone will benefit from.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that the short term and the long term is very different. If you look at a project now, and 70% of it, the cost of energy, in terms of renewable hydrogen, 30% the cost of electrolysis. If you can't lower those both ends with like a cheaper, more affordable supply chain, more manufacturing, essentially, I think that's the key and it will help everyone. But what is true is a lot of countries have been positioning themselves to become exporters of hydrogen. So the likes of
Right.
Chile, Saudi, Australia, and those plans may have to change very, very quickly, because the likelihood is with this sort of spur, what I can see here is the US may become a really key exporter of hydrogen. Not because I don't, the thing necessarily this $3 will mean that this hydrogen goes abroad. And my guess is that many other countries would maybe put an impediment on that anyhow, or even the US would put an impediment on that. But because it's going to lower cost so much of production that over time it'll just become. So if anything, the US is ensuring themselves like a piece of the export pile. Right? This is how I'm
Well-
reading it. Alejandro, I don't know if you agree. And Frank,
Well,
of course.
I would just quickly add that I think a lot of countries, for example, Europe, which has created a strategy whereby they will be looking to import 10 million tons of hydrogen per year. They are seeing this as potentially an opportunity to get more affordable hydrogen that's effectively being subsidized by the US taxpayer. My view on that is, again, going back to this number, we're the second largest consumer of hydrogen in the world behind China. We have a demand of 11 million tons per year. I think that in the short to medium term, a lot of the production that has to be on US shores is going to be consumed domestically. So I would just caution some of the other parts of the world that think all of this cheap hydrogen is just going to be exported to their geographies. I think it's going to satisfy the US market first. And then the other side of that is we do talk a lot about exporting and all of the associated infrastructure, but that's still a very early stage industry. I mean, you wouldn't be able to export the quantities that we're talking about with today's technology, and that's going to take some time to develop. I mean, even here in the US, where we have pockets of high supply, very, very distant from the pockets of demand, right? For example, the California transportation market, you are talking about needing to build and create pipeline infrastructure that can sustain or transport hydrogen, because we're talking about reusing the existing infrastructure we have, but a lot of the pipelines that are in place can't transport 100% hydrogen. So that's something else that even here in the US, it's going to take some time in terms of transportation and moving from point X to point Y.
Not only technology, but also costs, right? It makes it so much higher. So
yes.
Okay, Frank, have you found any questions you'd like to ask to answer?
Well,
And the same for Mona.
I'll just make a comment on this one. In fact, I saw a question that you segued over to from a man named John Haley, who was asking about how will the IRA affect global H2 export market. And I'll just make a comment in the sake of time that Alejandro is right. There was a significant amount of gray hydrogen in the US already that can be converted. It's a huge addressable market. And then you have the incremental uses for heavy duty transportation or even aviation. They will begin to be absorbed. But one thing I will comment on is that, in the US, there's an industry here that is looking to be converted into hydrogen in so many ways. And that's our petrochemical and oil and gas industry. And so the infrastructure, the knowledge of LNG exporting, the investment in large assets that can take cheap hydrogen and do something else with it is not a new activity. I believe it's going to be a bit further out than the initial stimulus of domestic production. But the US has been very capable of stimulating investment and engineering to be an exporter of resources. And I see that being something down the road that we are very capable of taking on. How it develops and when, that's still part of the building blocks.
Thank you very much. The Lego sets that you said, I'm really excited, because Mona is completely right. Like I see the more creativity, more change coming from the US than other markets. You guys are more carrot, we are more stick. So it's one of those things. Mona, you wanted to answer any specific question that you've seen?
I think I think one of the questions I saw had to do with, which I think was a good one, is whether that a hydrogen plant could qualify for Section 45D tax credit for advanced manufacturers that was powered by solar or wind, that qualifies by ITC or PTC, and then the hydrogen produced qualified for a PTC of $3 per kilogram, i.e., can all these three credits, the PTC and the ITC, be stacked? And the answer is yes, so long as the Section 45D credit can only be claimed after the taxpayer has received an allocation from the IRS. So there is also just two other quick things I'll say that are related to this. The hydrogen PTC is will be subject to a periodic inflation adjustment.
Mhm.
And, with respect to, just the last thing I'll say, I think, because we didn't really talk about this, the carbon capture utilization and sequestration, the IRA provided a much needed boost to the CCUS industry. What it did, it increases the credit rates and makes it easier for projects to qualify for that credit. And it also provided for direct pay, which is another webinar, which will expand the ability to finance CCUS projects. So that just wanted to, make sure that that was one thing. And the other is that if you have a project that claims tax credits under the Section 45Q, you cannot also claim bonus credit for domestic content. So, also with 45Q tax credits, you have the same wage and apprentice rules that apply to the Section 45 PTC and the Section 48 ITC. The Section 45Q is reduced 20% of the full credit amount if the project does not begin construction no more than 60 days after the wage and apprentice guidance is issued. So I just wanted to just say that before we ended.
And God for lawyers, because this isn't easy to navigate. If you're not a lawyer.
It's fun. We have fun. We love it. It's fun.
I see it. And Frank is also like nodding there. Yes. So okay. So here is like, you guys, we've been working from ATA Insights from Grandma, like in hydrogen and renewable hydrogen for more than 3 years now. We've been mostly in Europe and Latin America, as I said, but we now have a compromise that we're going to dedicate as much time, resources, and effort in the market in the US. Okay, so we're going to do events, we're going to do a lot more webinars. So here's my promise to you guys, is that we're going to put a lot of this more together, because I also see here that instead of one webinar, we could have had about 20. So I'd like to, with the association, we have 24, and with Mona, work out many more things that we could maybe explore further. And also for you guys in the audience, sign up, send it to your colleagues. Let's get more people on board and send us the parts that you want to explore further that are important. We'll try to get topics out, and we could very easily be doing more of this information. I think is key. There is so many areas for us to explore. So this is my invitation to you guys, the panelists, and also my invitation to the audience. Well, hopefully we'll see you again within a few weeks, because for me, it's like the more this information is going, the better. We can get like some flow about different aspects, about technologies, an aspect that I control a lot better, financing, less so we can get more and more information, and that the legal aspects are huge. And of course, with the association, I think we could just work so much more. So invitation to you guys, and a compromise for us to really spend a lot more resources in this industry, because in this geography, because I think honestly within 2 years you're going to be leading, this industry is going to be led from the front for the US. It's going to be a major shift in there, and I want to be part of that, and I think we all want to be part of that. So without further ado, because we're already 10 minutes more, I'd like to thank Frank. I'd like to thank Mona. I'd like to thank Alejandro for this. I'd like to also, again, I highlight that this is like a compromise we're taking. I would like to work with you guys very, very closely in the audience, and also the panelists. And we will hopefully see you again. And just that I'm really sorry we haven't been able to answer the questions. I think we need to just do further webinars in more detail, and that we will see you very, very soon. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Alejandro. Thank you, Mona. And see you soon.